Hey guys, it's Tina and I am back for a swatch and review video of a palette that isn't yet released, which is exciting for me because this is the first time that I am able to test a product, swatch it, use it, actually get full use of it for a couple of weeks before it's even released, and I can fully test it out before I do a review. And that's not typical, not for me anyway. The bigger beauty bloggers tend to get products ahead of time. I am not one of those, and I was lucky enough this time around. Ipsy had a contest and they were giving away the Too Faced chocolate bonbons palette. Yeah, and I entered and I won. So I got this weeks and weeks ago, and I've posted swatches on my Instagram, and I think that's my most reposted Instagram post ever. Good thing I watermarked it because people were not, I'm sure people are not giving credit to who posted it, so my watermark is there, so people have been reposting and giving me credit. But anyway, it's the Too Faced chocolate bonbons palette, and this palette has been such a tease on Instagram. It was in the background of like Too Faced pictures, like, oh, sneak peek of what we're gonna do, and it's been such a tease, and it's coming out December 8th. So if this is on your radar, if you're interested in this guy, if you're setting your clock, getting your calendars marked, getting your bank account ready to hit purchase and like storm the website on December 8th, I'm going to give you the swatches ahead of time so you can see if there's something that you really want to get into, and we'll jump into the review as well. So if you want to see the swatches, we're going to do that right now because I know that's what you're here for. So let's jump into the swatches and then we'll jump into the review. So let's go ahead and take a look at the overall palette of 16 shades. First up, we have the shade Almond Truffle. Then we have the first highlight shade, the large highlight shade, which is Satin Sheets. Then we have Sprinkles, Molasses Chip, and the shade Malted. Then in the second row, we have Cashew Chew, Cotton Candy, Cafe au Lait, Bordeaux, Mocha, and Black Currant. Then in the bottom row we have Dark Truffle, Pecan Praline, Totally Fetch, Earl Grey, and then the last highlight shade, which is Divinity. I'm going to do these swatches on my arm using a light layer of primer and an e.l.f. eyeshadow brush, and I'm going to start with the highlight shades. The first one is the Satin Sheets. This is the large highlight shade. It's a shimmery golden champagne shade, really beautiful and has great pigmentation, followed by Divinity, which is the second highlight shade, which is just a pale ivory beige shade. Now we're going back to the first row of the palette, and the first shade is Almond Truffle, which is a matte mauve brown shade. It has good pigmentation but needs to be built up a little bit. Then we have the shade Sprinkles, which is a pinky champagne shade with a frosty shimmery finish, and it has good color payoff, but it's a very light shade. Then we have the shade Molasses Chip, which is a golden bronze shade. It has great pigmentation, doesn't require a lot to build it up to this beautiful pigmentation at all. And then we have the shade Malted, which is a deep matte brown shade with golden sparkle, but the sparkle doesn't really show up once it's applied. To the second row we have the shade Cashew Chew, which is just a neutral tone beige shade with a satin finish. It comes off mostly matte. Then we have Cotton Candy, which is a medium shimmery pink shade, really beautiful pigmentation, followed by Cafe au Lait, which is a beautiful taupe shade. It leans more on the silver side with beautiful pigmentation, followed by Bordeaux, which is a red and brown shade. This one takes a little bit of building up, but it does have good pigmentation in a couple of swipes. Then we have the shade Mocha, which is a medium toned caramelly brown shade. Takes a little bit to build it up, but it would make a good blending shade. And then the least favorite of mine is Black Currant, which is just a purpley shade, like a dusty muted purple with shimmer. Not my favorite shade. Followed by Dark Truffle, which is in the last row, which is a beautiful dark brown shimmery shade. And then we have Pecan Praline, which is a muted kind of cementy beige shade, followed by Totally Fetch, which is that bright pop of pink. Great pigmentation. It's beautiful. Then we have Earl Grey, which is just a graphite kind of steel gray shade. So that's going to finish up the swatches. And here you can see all 16 shades swatched on my arm for reference. Alright, so now you've seen the swatches, you've seen the colors, you see what to expect. Let's talk about the rest of the palette. Now, the price is what I like to jump into first, and the other Too Faced palettes, I don't know the actual price for this, but the other Too Faced palettes retail for $49, so I don't think this is gonna go outside of this. I think it's gonna be $49 for this palette, and it contains 16 shades, and there are 14 eyeshadows that are 0.03 ounces. A typical eyeshadow is 0.05 ounces. So you're getting a little bit less than a typical small eyeshadow on the market. And then there are two larger eyeshadows, which are the highlight colors, that are 0.07 ounces. So they're the size of, say, the the Makeup Forever eyeshadows, or like those larger pan eyeshadows. And for me, $49 is a good price point for these kinds of palettes. Too Faced is kind of a mid-range brand. It's stacked up against Smashbox and Urban Decay and Anastasia Beverly Hills and who else? Kat Von D. So if you look through the palettes on the Sephora website, you have the Urban Decay Gwen Stefani palette, which has 15 eyeshadows, so it has one less eyeshadow, and it's $58. So you're saving $9 there. The Kat Von D palettes have 12 eyeshadows, and they're $46. So you're getting 4 more eyeshadows. The Tarte palettes are 12 eyeshadows for $45. And I could go on, but I'm just giving you a sense of the price point and where it lines up in the market. And I should also mention that the palette doesn't come with a brush, a dual-ended brush like the Urban Decay palettes. It doesn't come with a primer. So keep that in mind when considering if you're going to invest in it. But I think $49 is a good price point for this palette. Now let's go ahead and talk about the packaging, which I think is the most polarizing aspect of this palette. Some people love it that it's this pastel pink and it has heart shapes and it's cute and it's really fun and girly. And then on the other side, people are like, oh my god, it looks cheap, it looks tacky, it looks like something a kid would play with. And I get both ends of the spectrum. I understand. It is kind of cheap looking. It is kind of reminiscent of childhood when you had that little, you know, those play makeup sets. Because it is a light pink. It's a pastel pink. It has heart shapes. I get it. But it's following their chocolate theme. And these are bonbons. Now, would I have been happier if it wasn't heart shapes but still pink? I think so. I think it would have been more alluring, a little bit, yes, it's cute, but it's not girly, childish cute. And that's the only thing that I would say, okay. But other than that, it's the typical Too Faced chocolate bar palette. Comes in this tin that has a magnetic clasp that, I mean, honestly, the magnetic clasp, I've always had a thing with that. It's not the most secure. In fact, the one on my semi-sweet now, it opens like that. So it's not the sturdiest packaging as far as durability. But it's a nice, strong palette that's gonna be travel friendly because it won't smash around necessarily, but it can open pretty easily, so you want to secure it in a good place where it won't just flop around. And then inside the palette, as typical, you have a little mirror. This one is not a full-size mirror, and it's not the most usable mirror either because they have chocolate bonbons kind of written on the inside, and the wording kind of gets in the way of the mirror. And it's still usable, but it's not my ideal size of mirror. And the lid, it doesn't quite have a hinge, so it doesn't stay in place, so you can't set it and use it like this. You kind of have to hold it in place. I think the mirror is kind of whatever. I don't use the mirror in palettes, but I know a lot of people use them and are kind of like, what's going on? I don't like the mirror, but it's not a very usable mirror. The eyeshadows themselves, so there's 16 shades with 14 being these heart-shaped ones. So you'll see they're little heart shapes. It's cutesy, it's girly, it's kind of childish, yes. And then there are 2 highlight shades that are the larger size eyeshadows, one at the top, one at the bottom. So that's the layout of the palette, and I'm happy to say that the names of the eyeshadows are printed on the shadows themselves. Now, does the average user need the names? No, but as bloggers, as beauty lovers, we want names for our eyeshadows. It's just, it's become a thing, but the names are printed. There's not a sleeve in here with the names. The names are printed in gold around each heart. So that's a good touch, I think, to the palette. Overall, I don't know, like, do you care that much about what the palette is encased in? Are you gonna put it on display? Like, are you gonna travel with it? It's hit or miss depending on what you look for in packaging, but it's cute and, you know, it's functional, it works. So yeah. Now let's go ahead and jump into the nitty-gritty of the palette. The application, the performance, the shade selection, and what I think about the overall palette. So I'll start out with the highlight shades in the palette. You have Satin Sheets and Divinity. Satin Sheets is the shimmer shade. I'm actually wearing that on my lid. And Divinity is it's not a matte, it's a satin finish eyeshadow. I have that beneath my brow, blended in very lightly. And I'll mention that the highlight shades in this palette versus the original chocolate bar, they're smaller. So you're getting 0.07. In here, there was 0.01. The eyeshadows themselves, the regular ones, the smaller ones, are the same size, but the highlight ones are a little bit smaller, but I doubt you're ever gonna run out of them because they're larger size. And they did include larger size highlight shades because they expect you to use that more. The thing I will mention about the highlight shades, in the other palettes you had a matte highlight shade and a shimmery highlight shade, and this one doesn't have a matte highlight shade. It's strictly a satin. Even though it looks mostly matte, it's a satin. It definitely has a sheen to it. What I like about these highlight shades is they can actually work as a highlight on the skin. It's a very beautiful shimmery light shade. I should pop some on so you can see what I mean. I'm going to use the Satin Sheets shade, very lightly pop it on the high points of my cheekbones. And it blends very nicely. It's a very nice sheen and I think it works beautifully. So there's that. And the satin shade, this would probably work for a lighter skin tone. Not too light though, because it doesn't go extremely light. But I like the highlight shades. Now with working with the palette, I found that I needed a blend-in shade. Not necessarily all the time, but for the most part, you're gonna probably need to grab a blend-in shade because the matte blend-in shades in here, Pecan Praline is a neutral tone, it's a gray tone beige. Probably not gonna work for the majority of people. Almond Truffle was the closest I could get to a blend-in shade. I used it in my crease. Mocha is a little bit too deep for me for a crease shade, but it would work on deeper skin tone. And then Cashew Chew would work on lighter skin tone, but again, it has kind of a neutral undertone, so if you have warm undertones, it probably won't work as a crease shade for you, and it's a satin finish. So there's no real crease blend-in shades, I would say, in this palette. So you'd have to grab blend-in shades from other palettes or single eyeshadows. For me, I use my Makeup Forever ones. As you can see, the mocha shade is just a bit too dark for me to use as a blend-in shade. So I grabbed my blend-in shades, and I think everyone should have blend-in shades in their collection. So that doesn't bother me, but it might bother you if you want to take this palette alone and use it, you know, by itself. You probably need to bring blend-in shades as well. And as far as the dark shades, I kind of found myself wanting a deeper matte shade, because Earl Grey and Dark Truffle, which are the two dark shades, are satin shades. They're a little bit shimmery. They're not flat matte, and I felt like I needed a matte for my crease area. Again, it's up to what you're gonna go for in your looks. You can use these in the crease and, you know, darken up the outer V, but I just felt I needed a matte, darker shade. And the other palettes had a couple of darker shades. So this one had the Triple Fudge, which was a deep dark brown, where you could use that as a liner. You could use that to deepen up the crease. And the Semi-Sweet had Licorice, which was a matte black. So I think that's what was missing here, was a matte deep shade. The Malted shade, even though it's a dark brown, it's more of a satin shade with shimmer in it. So that to me is the only drawback. Other than that, I think the shade selection is actually very nice. It's a cool tone palette. So you're gonna have gray tone neutrals and beiges in here, and you're gonna have more pinks. I personally like that. I like the theme of it. It's a pink themed palette, so obviously that's what you're looking to get. If you're not into pinks, this might not be the palette for you, but if you're into pinks and you're into nice pops of colors and you're into neutral to warm tone shades, this is gonna be a good one for you. This look I did was great. I just pulled a deeper, darker shade for the outer lid area, like I mentioned. But there is a taupe in here. There's a dark red brown, the pink, the cotton candy, and the sprinkles, beautiful shades. The black currant actually reminds me a lot of, actually no, I take that back. It's similar to the black forest truffle in the original palette. There aren't really that many crossover shades, I would say, in this palette. Even the browns are a little bit more neutral or gray tone than the ones in the original chocolate bar. Even the bronzy gold shade is like a medium shade between two of the shades in this palette. And in the semi-sweet palette, again, I don't see many crossover shades at all, except that malted may look a little bit like cocoa chili, except that it has less shimmer and it's more of a pinky shimmer versus a gold shimmer. But other than that, there aren't any real crossover shades. So if you think you're gonna duplicate shades, good job Too Faced on not duplicating shades. But I feel like this is a good palette for pink lovers if you like that pop of color. And I am happy to announce that the pink color, the Totally Fetch, hi, Mean Girls, actually performs a lot better than the Blueberry Swirl pop of color in this palette. All the shades performed well. They had great pigmentation, good color payoff. Like, they actually showed up. Even the colorful shades did not take a lot to show up. And they blend really nice, and it does smell like chocolate. The chocolate scent is fading though, which somebody mentioned that their chocolate bar palette faded. This is fading a lot faster than the semi-sweet or the Too Faced, the original. The scent has faded to about what my Too Faced original is, which I had for the longest time. So the scent I find is fading, but there is still that faint scent of chocolate. I really like that. I really enjoy that. So yeah, all in all, I think it's a good palette. I think it's a decent price. I think the colors are nice. I think they blend really nice. And I think you would enjoy it if you picked it up or if you got it as a gift for a friend or a family member. I think it's a really beautiful palette. I think this one is a good find. So if you're interested in this palette, let me know. If you're gonna pick it up, let me know. And if you enjoyed this video, definitely hit the thumbs up button. As usual, I will leave links to where you can pick this up. It's gonna be available on the Too Faced site. It's gonna be available on Ulta and Sephora, so you can definitely check it out either online or wait till it hits stores so you can swatch it yourself and figure out if you like it. As usual, I'll leave links to my Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook page as well, where you can follow me along. And if you're not already subscribed, hit the subscribe button for videos like this. And until my next video, which will be very soon, I will talk to you. Love you guys. Bye.
I found an article about the originals. Shall I read it to you?
Siri's all up in my business. No, Siri, bye.
What kind of businesses are you looking for?
Siri, bye.
Until next time.